William and Sophia were known far and wide as one of the wealthiest couples in Lagos. They lived in a mansion so grand that people would stop to admire its towering gates and shining windows. Their wealth was the stuff of legends, but behind the marble walls of their mansion, things were far from perfect. William and Sophia had been married for 15 long years, but it wasn't love that brought them together. Their marriage was arranged by their wealthy families to strengthen business ties, and from the beginning, they treated their union as a contract more than a relationship. Both of them were proud, stubborn, and unwilling to compromise. They each believed they were better than the other, and neither was willing to back down. To the outside world, they appeared to be the perfect couple, but inside their home, they barely spoke, and when they did, it was always to argue. The real source of conflict, however, began when William's family started pressuring him for something only he could provide: an heir. They wanted a child to carry on the family name, someone to inherit the vast wealth and empire they had built. William, too, began to feel the weight of the expectation. He had everything: money, power, and a beautiful wife. But without a child, his family's legacy felt incomplete. One night, while sitting in the quiet, cold dining room, William gathered the courage to ask Sophia about having children. She had been avoiding the topic for years, and now, at nearly 40 years old, it was becoming urgent. "Sophia," William began, his voice thick with the weight of the conversation he dreaded. "It's been 15 years. My family is constantly asking when we'll have a child. I think it's time." Sophia, who was idly flipping through a fashion magazine, barely looked up. "A child? Now? Why should I go through all that stress just to ruin my body?" She scoffed. "I want to maintain my figure. I worked hard for this. I'm not about to let pregnancy change that." William was stunned by her cold response. "But we need an heir, Sophia. You know how important it is for the family. Everyone expects us to—" "Who cares what everyone expects?" Sophia interrupted, glaring at him. "You think I want to ruin my body just because your family wants a baby? I'm not a fool. I like how I look, and I want to keep it that way." William's frustration grew. He slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "You care more about your appearance than the future of this family. I can't believe this." Sophia rose from her chair, her eyes narrowing in anger. "Don't raise your voice at me, William. I didn't marry you for love. I married you for wealth, just like you married me for status. If you want children so badly, go find someone else to carry them. I'm not interested." The coldness in Sophia's words was like a slap in the face. William stood there speechless as she stormed off to her separate bedroom. It was no secret that they hadn't shared the same room in years. Their marriage was nothing more than a formality, an arrangement to keep up appearances. For the next few weeks, the silence between them grew thicker. William was filled with anger and frustration while Sophia remained indifferent. She spent her days shopping, attending parties, and flaunting her wealth to anyone who would listen. She cared little for the idea of family, motherhood, or the pressures that weighed on William's shoulders. In the evenings, William would leave the house, finding comfort in the arms of other women. He justified his actions by telling himself that Sophia didn't care about him, so why should he care about her? Meanwhile, Sophia did the same. She had her own affairs, her own secrets, and made no effort to hide them. Their loveless marriage became a quiet battlefield, both of them pretending not to notice how far they had drifted from each other. They were two strangers bound only by wealth and pride, living under the same roof but in completely different worlds. As the pressure mounted on William to produce an heir, his frustration turned into desperation. His family wouldn't stop asking, and he could no longer hide behind excuses. Yet every time he tried to bring up the subject with Sophia, it ended in a fight. She was adamant that she had no desire to have children, and was perfectly happy maintaining her figure and luxurious lifestyle. One evening, after another argument, William found himself standing alone in the grand, empty living room of their mansion. He looked around at the vast space. The expensive furniture, the crystal chandeliers, and the marble floors, and it all felt meaningless. What was the point of all this wealth if there was no one to share it with, no children to pass it on to, no love to make it feel like a home? Sophia, never deciding that she did not want to be dealing with William anymore, hired a new maid to help her convey any message she wanted to send him. One hot afternoon, while flipping through applications sent by the housekeeping agency, Sophia's eyes landed on the name Emily. The resume was simple. Emily was a young woman from a poor background, no impressive qualifications, but she had experience working as a housemaid in other wealthy homes. "She'll do," Sophia said, tossing Emily's application aside as she instructed her personal assistant to call and hire her. A few days later, Emily arrived. She was a quiet, unassuming young woman, barely 22 years old, with soft features and wide, nervous eyes. Her skin was a deep brown, her hair always tied back in a neat bun, and she dressed in simple clothes that spoke of her modest upbringing. Despite her humble appearance, she had an air of determination about her. Quiet strength that Sophia didn't notice at first but would come to envy later. Sophia didn't waste any time introducing Emily to her duties. The young maid was responsible for cleaning her room and William's room, since the couple no longer spoke directly to one another. Emily became the bridge between them. Whenever Sophia needed to communicate with William, she would send Emily a message, and the same went for William, who used Emily to relay messages to his wife. At first, Emily was just grateful for the job. She had been out of work for months, and this opportunity was a blessing. Even though the mansion's cold, tense atmosphere made her uneasy, more importantly, the money from this job would help her sick mother, who was in the hospital battling an illness that required expensive treatment. For Emily, failure was not an option. She needed to keep this job, no matter what. Emily worked tirelessly to meet the couple's impossible standards. Sophia barely acknowledged her presence except to bark orders or hand her lists of things to buy. Emily's mornings were spent polishing the marble floors, dusting the grand chandeliers, and ensuring Sophia's room remained perfectly pristine. William, on the other hand, was different. Unlike Sophia, who treated Emily like a shadow, William often watched her as she worked. His eyes followed her as she moved through the rooms. At first, Emily didn't notice his lingering stares, too focused on her tasks, but soon she began to feel his presence more keenly. There was something unsettling about the way he looked at her, something that made her skin crawl. One evening, as Emily was cleaning William's room, he appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a smirk on his face. "You've been doing a good job, Emily," William said, his voice low and smooth. "The house hasn't looked this good in a long time." Emily paused, wiping her hands on her apron as she stood nervously by the bed. "Thank you, sir. I'm just doing my best." William stepped into the room, his eyes still fixed on her. "You know, I appreciate hard work. Not everyone in this house does. It's nice to have someone who listens and gets things done." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She forced a smile, trying to remain polite. "I'm glad I could help." But William didn't leave. He moved closer, his presence filling the room. "You're a good girl, Emily. You deserve to be treated well. Don't let anyone here make you feel less than that." Emily's heart raced. She didn't know how to respond, so she mumbled something about needing to finish her work and hurried out of the room as quickly as possible. From that moment on, she made every effort to avoid being alone with William, but it wasn't always easy. He had a way of finding her, of cornering her when Sophia wasn't around. One night, while the house was quiet and Sophia was away on another trip, William caught Emily alone in the kitchen. He approached her, his footsteps soft but deliberate. "Emily," he said, his voice sending a shiver down her spine. She turned to face him, trying to hide her fear. "You don't have to be afraid of me. I just want to talk." But his intentions were far from innocent. Before Emily could react, William grabbed her arm. His grip was firm and unrelenting. The fear she had been trying to push away now consumed her, but no matter how much she struggled, she couldn't break free. That night, William raped Emily, leaving her broken and terrified. Afterward, William threatened her, his voice cold and menacing. "If you tell anyone about this, you'll regret it. I'll make sure you lose this job, and with my influence, I'll make sure you never work anywhere else. You might even find yourself in jail." Emily, devastated and frightened for her life, had no choice but to keep silent. She knew that without this job, her mother's treatment would stop, and she couldn't afford to let that happen. So she swallowed her pain, buried her shame, and went back to work as though nothing had happened. Emily's world seemed to collapse around her when she discovered she was pregnant. She sat alone in her tiny room, staring at the small bump that was beginning to form on her belly, wondering how her life had spiraled so terribly out of control. The terror of the situation weighed heavily on her. She was pregnant with the child of the man who had violated her, and there was no way to hide it forever. What was she going to do? She tried to go about her duties as normal, but the stress of keeping her secret hidden was overwhelming. Every time William glanced her way, her heart raced, terrified that he would somehow know. One evening, when Emily could no longer bear the weight of her burden, she gathered the courage to confront William. She waited until Sophia was out of the house, as she often was these days, off attending to her social circles. Emily entered William's office, her hands trembling, her voice barely a whisper. "Sir, I need to talk to you." William barely looked up from his desk, uninterested in what he assumed was another trivial matter. "What is it, Emily?" he asked, annoyance seeping into his voice. Taking a deep breath, Emily finally spoke the words she had been dreading. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, William didn't respond, his expression blank as if he hadn't quite heard her. But then his face twisted in anger. "What did you say?" he demanded. Emily's knees felt weak, but she forced herself to stand tall. "I'm pregnant. I've been to the doctor, and it's too late to—" Before she could finish her sentence, William slammed his fist down on the table, his eyes blazing with fury. "You were supposed to take care of this. I gave you money to get rid of it. How could you let this happen?" Emily flinched at his outburst. "I tried, but the doctor said it's too far along. I could die if I try to remove it now." For a brief moment, William's anger faltered, replaced by a cold indifference. "You should have been more careful. You should have done something sooner." He stood up from his chair, towering over Emily. "I don't want this child, do you hear me? I don't care what happens to you, but you will not drag me into your mess. My family will never accept a child from a nobody like you." Emily's heart shattered. The man who had assaulted her was now telling her that her baby, his baby, was nothing to him. She had expected as much, but hearing it from his lips made it all the more devastating. "I can't get rid of it now," Emily said, her voice shaking. "It's too late. The doctor said it could kill me." William narrowed his eyes, his face hardening with contempt. "That's not my problem, Emily. But I'm warning you, if you tell anyone, especially Sophia, about this, you'll regret it. I'll destroy you. You'll never work again, and I'll make sure your life becomes a living nightmare." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, but she nodded silently, knowing she was trapped. She had no choice but to endure this alone. As the months passed, Emily's pregnancy became harder to hide. Her once slim figure began to change, her belly swelling as the baby grew inside her. She wore loose clothing to cover it, but soon her secret was too obvious. Sophia, who had long ago stopped paying attention to Emily beyond giving her orders, began to notice something was different. It wasn't long before one of Sophia's friends made a remark that sent everything into motion. They were hosting a small gathering at the mansion when one of the women, known for her sharp tongue, leaned in close to Sophia and whispered, "Your maid, Emily, she looks like she's put on quite a bit of weight. Are you sure she isn't pregnant?" Sophia's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Pregnant? That's ridiculous. She would never—" But as the evening wore on, Sophia couldn't shake the comment from her mind. The next morning, she watched Emily more closely, noticing how the girl moved with care, how her clothes seemed to strain at the seams. Suspicion nodded at Sophia, and soon enough she called Emily into her room. Her cold eyes scanned the maid from head to toe. "Are you hiding something from me?" she asked. Emily froze, her hands trembling. "No, ma'am." Sophia wasn't convinced. Her voice turned sharp. "Don't lie to me. I know something is going on. Now tell me, are you pregnant?" There was no point in lying anymore. Emily's face turned pale as she nodded, her voice barely audible. "Yes, ma'am. I'm pregnant." Sophia's eyes widened in shock, but it didn't take long for the shock to give way to fury. "You're pregnant?" she hissed. "Who is responsible for this?" Emily remained silent, unable to form the words that would reveal the truth. But Sophia, quick-witted and suspicious, began to piece things together. The separate bedrooms, the tension between her and William, the way he had been acting around Emily. It hit her like a lightning bolt. "It was William, wasn't it?" she hissed. Emily didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. Sophia exploded with rage, her hands shaking as she pointed towards the door. "Get out! I don't want to see your face again. You're fired. Get out of my house." Emily's heart sank as she realized she had nowhere else to go. "Please, ma'am, I have nowhere else to turn. My mother is sick in the hospital, and I need this job to support her." Sophia's expression hardened. "That's not my problem. You can take your pregnancy and your story somewhere else. Leave now before I call security to throw you out." Emily, broken and defeated, packed her few belongings and left the mansion. She wandered the streets, her mind swirling with fear and uncertainty. She didn't know what to do or where to go. Her mother was still in the hospital, and without her job, Emily had no way to pay for the treatment her mother desperately needed. Days passed and Emily's mother died, her illness worsening without proper care. Emily was left alone, grieving the loss of her mother while carrying the weight of her unborn child. As time went on, Emily gave birth to triplets, 3 beautiful boys who were the only light in her now dark world. But raising them wasn't easy. Without a job, she was forced to scrape by, hawking goods on the streets just to feed her children. Every day was a struggle for survival, and Emily often wondered how much more she could endure. Meanwhile, back in the mansion, William and Sophia continued their miserable lives, both trapped in the loveless marriage they had built for themselves. William, though consumed by his own guilt, never mentioned Emily again. And Sophia, still furious, made sure to erase any trace of the maid who had once lived under their roof. But little did they know, their paths would cross with Emily once more, and the consequences of their past actions would come back to haunt them, in ways they could never have imagined. Years passed, and life in the grand mansion remained as cold and loveless as ever. William and Sophia continued their charade of a marriage, but there was no affection, no warmth between them. They were 2 strangers living under the same roof, each consumed by their own selfish desires. Sophia continued to maintain her appearance, attending glamorous parties and surrounding herself with high society friends, while William threw himself deeper into his work and various affairs. Yet with each passing year, a sense of emptiness began to creep into William's heart. Despite his wealth, power, and the freedom to live as he pleased, something was missing. The laughter of children, the joy of family. These things had never mattered to him before, but as he grew older, he started to feel the weight of his decisions. His brothers and cousins, all with children of their own, often spoke proudly of their families, and the pressure from his parents to produce an heir never ceased. William had hoped that eventually Sophia would change her mind about having children, but she remained steadfast in her refusal. Now, after nearly 20 years of marriage, Sophia's beauty began to fade, but her obsession with staying youthful remained strong. She would spend hours in front of the mirror applying creams and potions, undergoing treatments, all to preserve the image of the stunning woman she once was. The irony was that she had maintained her figure, but her heart had become hollow, cold as the stone walls of their mansion. One evening, as William sat alone in his study, staring out the window at the city lights, a deep sadness washed over him. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and success, felt like a prison. His thoughts drifted back to the events of 5 years ago to Emily. He hadn't thought about her in a long time, but now for some reason, she entered his mind with an unsettling clarity. He remembered the day she had told him she was pregnant, the way he had dismissed her, threatened her, and let Sophia throw her out without a second thought. What had become of her? Was she still alive? What happened to the child? His child? For the first time in years, William felt a pang of guilt. He had spent so long ignoring the consequences of his actions, but now, in his loneliness, they haunted him. Across town, Emily's life had been anything but easy. She had given birth to triplets, 3 boys, each a mirror image of their father with his strong features and dark eyes. They were her pride and joy, but raising them alone was a struggle beyond anything she had ever imagined. After her mother's death, Emily had taken to hawking on the streets to survive, selling anything she could get her hands on just to feed her children. She carried the boys on her back and in her arms as she walked through the busy markets of Lagos, calling out to passers-by to buy her wares. The city was loud, chaotic, and unforgiving, but it was all she had. The boys grew up fast, learning how to navigate the tough streets, helping their mother with her small business as best they could. Despite the hardships, Emily was fiercely protective of her children. They were all she had left, and she made sure they knew how much she loved them. But the years of hardship had taken their toll. Emily's once bright eyes were now tired, her hands calloused from hard labor. She often wondered what her life might have been like if things had been different. If she hadn't been forced to leave the mansion, if William had treated her with kindness instead of cruelty. Sometimes she saw men who looked like him on the street, rich, powerful, indifferent to the struggles of people like her, and it made her heart ache. Yet no matter how difficult life became, she never regretted keeping her children. They were her light in the darkness. One hot afternoon, as Emily and her boys were weaving through the crowded traffic, hawking their goods to the drivers stuck in gridlock, something unexpected happened. A sleek black car pulled up to a stop, and from the window, Emily heard a familiar voice calling out to her. "You there, young woman, come here." She turned, her heart skipping a beat. It was William. William hadn't expected to see her. He had been driving through the chaotic streets of Lagos, lost in thought when he spotted her. Emily standing there with 3 boys who looked eerily familiar. His breath caught in his throat. Could it be? After all these years, he ordered his driver to stop the car, his eyes fixed on her as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Emily, now standing in front of the car, looked into the window and saw William's face. She froze. Memories came rushing back. Memories of that terrible day when he had thrown her out, when he had denied his own child and threatened to ruin her life. She felt a mixture of fear, anger, and confusion. What did he want from her now? William stepped out of the car, his heart racing. The moment he saw the boys, there was no doubt in his mind. They were his sons. Each one of them bore his resemblance, and the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He had a family he had abandoned without a second thought. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Emily held her boys close, her protective instincts kicking in. "What do you want?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. William's mouth was dry, his mind racing as he searched for the right words. "Emily, I didn't know. I didn't care," Emily shot back, her voice filled with the pain and anger she had carried for years. "You threw me out when I needed you the most. You let me fend for myself, and now you just show up like this?" William lowered his gaze, ashamed. "I'm sorry. I was a different man back then. I didn't realize what I was doing. I was selfish." Emily's eyes welled up with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "It's too late for apologies, William. I've raised these boys on my own. You don't get to just walk back into our lives and act like you care." The boys, who had been watching silently, looked up at their mother, confused but protective. They didn't know the full story, but they could sense the tension in the air. I know I've done terrible things, William continued, his voice breaking, but I want to make it right. Please, Emily, let me be part of their lives. Let me make up for everything I've done. Emily stood there, her heart pounding, trying to process what William had just said. The man who had once coldly discarded her and her unborn children was now standing before her, asking for forgiveness. But how could she trust him? How could she believe that he had truly changed? The boys tugged at her dress, their young faces filled with curiosity. They had never known their father. Emily had never told them much about him, and now here he was, standing before them, looking at them with eyes that mirrored their own. They were only 5 years old, but they could sense that something important was happening. Please, Emily, William said again, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Let me make amends. Let me be a father to them. I know I can't erase the past, William continued, his voice breaking, but I want to be better. I want to be the father they deserve. Emily studied him, trying to see if there was truth in his words. There was something different about him now. He seemed more vulnerable, more sincere than the cold and arrogant man she had once known. But could she trust it? I don't know if I can forgive you, William, Emily said, her voice trembling. You left me when I needed you the most. You let me struggle alone with 3 babies. I lost my mother because of it. I've had to fight for everything, every meal, every piece of clothing on their backs. William hung his head, guilt pressing down on him like a weight. I know, he whispered. I know what I did was unforgivable, but please, give me a chance to be there for them now. I want to help. I want to make it right. For a long time, Emily didn't speak. The busy streets of Lagos seemed to fade into the background as she stood there, torn between her anger and the possibility of a new beginning. Could she really allow William back into their lives? Would he truly change, or would he hurt them again? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Emily spoke. If you really want to be part of their lives, she said slowly, then you have to prove it. Not with words, but with actions. I won't let you hurt them the way you hurt me. William nodded, relief washing over him. I'll prove it, Emily. I swear I'll prove it. Over the next few months, William made good on his word. He visited Emily and the boys regularly, slowly earning their trust. He helped them financially, providing food, clothes, and better living conditions. For the first time in years, Emily didn't have to worry about how she would feed her children. The boys, too, began to warm up to William, though it wasn't easy at first. They were cautious, unsure of how to feel about this man who had suddenly appeared in their lives. But William was patient, taking the time to get to know them, to play with them, and to show them that he was serious about being their father. As the months passed, Emily saw a change in William. He wasn't the same cold, arrogant man she had once worked for. He was softer now, more humble, more attentive. He showed genuine love and concern for his sons. And though it took time, Emily began to believe that maybe he truly had changed. However, things were far from perfect. Sophia, unaware of William's growing relationship with Emily and the boys, continued her own life of indulgence, oblivious to the changes in her husband. William knew that he couldn't keep this secret forever, and eventually the truth would come out. But for now, he focused on building his relationship with his children and earning back Emily's trust. One evening, after a long day of spending time with the boys, William pulled Emily aside. They stood outside her small home, the sun setting behind them, casting long shadows on the ground. Emily, William began, his voice low and serious. I want to do more for you and the boys. I want to give you a better life. Emily crossed her arms, still cautious despite the progress they had made. We're doing fine. The boys are happy and we're getting by. I know, William said, but you deserve more. They deserve more. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I want you to come back to the mansion with the boys. You deserve a better home, a better life, and I want to provide that for you. Emily's heart skipped a beat. The thought of returning to that mansion, the place where she had suffered so much, filled her with fear and uncertainty. But at the same time, she knew that William was offering her and her children a chance at a life she could never give them on her own. "William, I don't know," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I'm not sure I can go back there." William took a step closer, his eyes filled with sincerity. "I know it's hard, but things are different now. I'm different. I want to make things right." "Please, Emily, let me give you and the boys the life you deserve." Emily looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception. But all she saw was a man who had changed, who had finally realized what truly mattered. "All right," she whispered. "We'll try." Emily's heart pounded as she stood outside William's mansion once again. It had been years since she had set foot in this place, and the memories of her time here flooded back, each one more painful than the last. But now she wasn't alone. Her boys, Emeka, Ayena, and Namdi, stood by her side, holding her hands tightly. They looked at the enormous house with wide eyes, their young faces filled with awe and curiosity. William opened the grand door, his expression a mix of relief and nervousness. "Welcome," he said softly, stepping aside to let them in. "This is your home now." Emily hesitated for a moment before stepping over the threshold. The house was just as she remembered it. Lavish, cold, and far too big for one family, but this time, something was different. There was warmth in William's eyes as he watched her and the boys. A warmth she had never seen before. As they settled in, William did everything he could to make them feel comfortable. He had arranged new rooms for the boys filled with toys and books, things they had never had before. He spent time with them every day, playing games, helping them with their schoolwork, and telling them stories. Slowly but surely, the boys began to accept him as their father. For Emily, it was harder. She couldn't forget the past, the way William had treated her, the way he had abandoned her when she needed him most. But she saw the effort he was making now, not just for their children, but for her as well. He apologized again and again, and though the words couldn't erase the pain, they helped to heal the wounds, little by little. William had made a decision. Though he was done living a lie, he had realized that his marriage to Sophia was nothing more than a hollow shell built on pride and wealth. It wasn't real, and it never had been. One evening, after the boys had gone to bed, William approached Emily, his face serious. "There's something I need to do," he said, sitting down beside her in the living room. "I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I can't keep living like this. I need to end things with Sophia." Emily looked at him, her heart racing. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to ask her for a divorce," William said, his voice firm. "This marriage, it's not real. It hasn't been for a long time. I married her for the wrong reasons, and I've been miserable ever since. I want to be free, and I want to be with you and our children." Emily's eyes widened. She hadn't expected this. Even though William had changed, she hadn't thought he would take such a drastic step. "William, are you sure? What if she doesn't agree? What if she tries to make things difficult for you?" William shook his head. "I don't care anymore. I've lived my whole life caring about what other people think, about wealth, about status. But none of that matters. What matters is you, Emily, and our children. I want to do what's right for us, and that means leaving this loveless marriage behind." Emily's heart softened as she looked at him. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the determination to make things right. It was a far cry from the man he had once been, the man who had hurt her, who had abandoned her. But now, standing before her was someone different, someone who had learned from his mistakes. The next morning, William called Sophia and asked her to come home. When she arrived, she was surprised to see Emily and the boys in the house. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice cold and sharp. "What are they doing here?" William stood tall, facing her without fear. "We need to talk," he said. Sophia narrowed her eyes, her anger barely concealed. "Talk about what? Why is she here? What are those children doing in my house?" William didn't hesitate. He explained everything: the affair, the pregnancy, how he had wronged Emily and abandoned her when she needed him the most. He told Sophia about the boys, how he had met them in Lagos traffic, and how he had come to realize that they were his. He told her about the change he had undergone, how he wanted to be a father to his sons, and build a real family with Emily. Sophia was furious. "So you cheated on me with the maid, and now you expect me to just accept this?" she spat. "I will never agree to a divorce. You'll regret this, William. I'll make sure you lose everything." William stood his ground, his voice calm but firm. "I don't care about the money, Sophia. I don't care about the status. All I care about is my family, the family I have with Emily and our boys. I want a divorce, and I won't stop until I get one." Sophia glared at him, her face twisted in anger. "You think you can just throw me away? You'll regret this, William." But William didn't back down. He had made his decision, and nothing Sophia could say would change his mind. "I'll handle whatever comes," he said. "But I'm done living in this lie of a marriage. I want to be free." After a long and bitter legal battle, William was granted his divorce. Sophia, furious and vengeful, tried to take as much as she could in the settlement. But William didn't care. He let her have the money, the property, the status symbols she so desperately clung to. All he wanted was to start over with Emily and their children. The day the divorce was finalized, William stood outside the courthouse, feeling lighter than he had in years. He turned to Emily, who was waiting for him with the boys. A smile spread across his face as he walked toward them. "It's done," he said, relief in his voice. "We're free." Emily smiled back. Though her heart still carried the weight of everything they had been through, for the first time in years she felt hopeful. They had a long road ahead of them, but now they could walk it together. As William knelt down to embrace his sons, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. The past could not be undone, but the future was theirs to shape. Together they would build a new life, a life of love, family, and hope. And as the sun set on that chapter of their lives, Emily knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged,